My name is Susan Wagner. All my life I thought I knew who I was. A daughter to two loving parents, a sister, a wife. Just an ordinary woman with a few habits and a drawer full of old letters I never opened. But then, I opened that drawer. And I realized my whole life was a carefully folded lie. You want the truth? So did I. Just don't make the mistake of thinking it sets you free. It turns everything upside down. And now if you're ready, I'll tell you what happened. And why I can never look at a garden, a mailbox, or the word family the same way again. The drawer she shouldn't have opened. What if everything you believed about your childhood was a lie? Susan only wanted to find the spare batteries. Instead, she found the end of her entire reality. Susan Wagner didn't mean to snoop. She needed AA batteries. The TV remote was dead and Frank, her husband, was already snoring on the couch like he was auditioning for a sleep apnea commercial. The drawer in her late mother's old dresser had always been a mess of takeout menus, rubber bands, and God only knew what else. But this time, nestled under a tattered booklet for a 1993 microwave, she saw a stack of envelopes. Old, yellowed, fragile, but too carefully bundled to be junk. Her hand paused, just for a second. Then again, since when did batteries come tied with silk ribbon? She sat on the edge of the bed. The letters were addressed to L. Wagner, her mother Louise. But the return address wasn't Dad's. It wasn't even familiar. Who the hell was C. Barrows from Oakland? Susan opened the first envelope. Louise, I'm still not over the night in Santa Cruz. You said it was a mistake, but I can't believe a mistake could feel that real. That right? She read it 3 times. Each time her mouth got drier. By the 4th line, she felt like she'd swallowed sandpaper. A mistake? Santa Cruz? 1982? Susan was born in 1983. A bitter laugh escaped her. It sounded foreign in her quiet childhood room, now sterilized by estate sale leftovers and the faint scent of lavender sachets her mother had hoarded like gold. It had only been a month since her mother died. They'd buried her in a green silk dress, the one Dad loved. Susan had insisted. Now she wasn't sure Dad ever saw her in it. Susan closed the drawer, then opened it again, pulled every letter. All 16. She laid them out like a forensic analyst. Years covered: 1981 to 1985. Tone: romantic, apologetic, obsessive. Content: frequent references to the girl. Never a name. Just the girl. Her. Couldn't be. Susan blinked and looked toward the mirror. Same wide-set eyes as her mother, sure. But that didn't prove anything. The Wagners were all broad-faced and brown-eyed. No one ever questioned her bloodline before. Until now. The next morning, Susan confronted her brother Daniel. He was halfway through a bagel and local news when she slammed a letter in front of him like a detective in a crime show. He read. He stopped chewing. "Is this a joke?" he asked, not laughing. "You tell me." "Mom." "She would never." "I found 16 of these," Susan hissed. "Do you want to read the one where she says, 'You would have been a better father than he ever was'?" Daniel looked pale. He set the bagel down. "You think Dad knew?" Susan shook her head slowly. "I think we didn't know a damn thing." That night, alone in the kitchen, Susan poured tea she wouldn't drink and stared at the stack of letters. She could feel something shifting beneath her skin. A slow seeping unraveling. Not anger. Not yet. Just the realization that her entire identity had a hole. And her mother had stitched over it with silence. She thought the truth ended with the letters. But what she was about to find next would make those look like bedtime stories. The photo she never meant to see. You think old photographs are harmless? Susan opened a dusty album, and the face staring back at her wasn't her father. At least, not the one who raised her. Susan couldn't sleep. The letters were stacked in a Ziploc bag now. A poor attempt at containment. As if plastic could stop the damage they'd already done. At dawn, she did the one thing she swore she wouldn't. Went back to the house. Their family home was supposed to be on the market. Realtor signs out front, staged furniture inside, neutral as a hotel room. But Susan still had the key, and muscle memory overruled grief. She walked barefoot across the creaky floors like she used to when sneaking peanut butter by the spoonful at midnight. The attic was still untouched. No one had touched that stuff since Dad died 3 years ago. Mom couldn't bear to, and Susan hadn't dared. Now it was time. The cardboard box was labeled Christmas Decor, 1985 to 1990. But inside, tangled between a plastic reindeer and some tinsel, was an old photo album. Susan wiped the cover with her sleeve. Black leather fraying at the corners. Heavy. The first pages were standard fare. Baby Susan in a ducky towel, Daniel with a bowl cut and no front teeth. Mom and Dad smiling in front of the old Buick. Beer in hand, sunburns on cheeks. And then page 7. Santa Cruz, 1982. The year before she was born. A candid photo. Her mother, unmistakable, laughing in the surf, hair plastered to her cheeks. And beside her, arm looped around her waist. Not Dad. This man was taller, darker skin, strong jaw, thick brows. His hand rested just under Louise's ribs like it belonged there. His name was written in fading pen beneath the photo. Lou plus Caleb that weekend. Susan stared at the name like it might blink. Caleb. The Barrows. The return address. The letters. So that's what she'd been to him, not Louise but Lou intimate. Real. She tore the photo from the page. Behind it, tucked carefully, was a receipt from a motel in Santa Cruz. Room 204. 2 nights. Paid in cash. There was even a doodle of a heart on the back. Susan let out a sharp breath. Laughed bitterly. Her mother had saved all of it. The woman who ironed her napkins and never allowed more than one brand of mayo in the house had kept evidence of an affair like it was a damn souvenir. When she returned home, Frank was sitting in front of the TV again, chewing popcorn like it was a job. She said nothing. Just walked past him with the photo in one hand and her own heartbeat in the other. She Googled the name Caleb Barrows. First hit obituary. Died in 2016. Oakland native. Civil rights attorney. Survived by wife, 2 sons. She clicked on an old photo embedded in a 2009 interview. Her stomach twisted. The man was older, yes. Gray in the beard. But the same face. Same jawline. And the younger son. She clicked again. Enlarged the image. His name was Marcus Barrows. Born 1983. The same year as her. Susan called Daniel. I need you to come over, she said. Why? Because I think I just found my twin. They sat in stunned silence, the photo between them like a crime scene clue. But Mom would have told us, Daniel finally said. Would she? Because she didn't tell us about 16 love letters, or motel receipts, or that she had a relationship with someone who wasn't Dad. Daniel shook his head. This is crazy. Susan nodded slowly. And yet here we are. They agreed to keep it quiet. For now. Test the waters. Maybe it was all coincidence. Susan didn't believe that. Not for a second. That night she emailed Marcus Barrows. Hi Marcus. I came across your father's obituary while researching my family's history. I believe our parents may have known each other. Would you be open to talking? She hovered over send. Then clicked. He replied within hours. But what he said wasn't just unexpected. It ripped open everything she thought she was prepared to handle. He looked just like her. You think you're ready to meet the man who might be your brother? Susan thought so too, until he opened the door. And what he said before she even spoke left her speechless. The reply came at 3:12 a.m. Hi Susan. This is unexpected but not entirely unfamiliar. My mother once mentioned a woman named Louise. Let's meet. I have questions too. Signed simply. Marcus. Susan reread it under the dim glow of the fridge light. The milk expired last week, but that was the least of her concerns. She set it back inside like it might explode. They met in Oakland, a small coffee shop with iron chairs and dry muffins. Marcus was already there, standing near the window, and when he turned, it hit her like a freight train. The same eyebrows, the same slightly too flat nose, the same "are you kidding me" squint she gave Frank at least twice a week. Marcus stared too. "You look," he started. Susan raised an eyebrow. "Like your father?" He laughed. "Short. Dry. Yeah. That." They sat. The conversation was cautious, controlled, like two diplomats with explosives taped to their backs. "So," Marcus said, "what exactly did you find?" Susan slid one letter across the table. "Just one." He read, blinked slowly. "My dad wasn't perfect," he said, "but he wasn't a liar. If this happened, he hid it from all of us too." "Do you have a birth certificate?" she asked. "I do, and I looked at it this morning. My mom got pregnant in March of '83. She said it was a miracle." Susan exhaled through her teeth. "Same month." They didn't say the word. "Not yet." Sibling. It felt radioactive. She got home to find Frank holding the same letter. "What the hell is this?" he asked, waving it like it owed him money. "Why were you going through my things? Why are you hiding love letters to your mother from a man who isn't your father?" Susan yanked it from his hand. "Because I didn't have a name for the storm I'm standing in, and I didn't need yours added to the forecast." Frank opened his mouth, closed it. He looked not angry. Something worse. Hurt. "You always said your family was boring," he said quietly. She smiled bitterly. "Turns out I was the only boring part." The next day Daniel called. "I did it," he said. "DNA kit. Express shipping." Susan sighed. "You sure? I need to know if I've been calling someone's sister for 40 years who isn't." That cut deep, but she understood. She ordered one too. Weeks passed. Susan met Marcus again, once at a park, once at a diner. Their conversations deepened. Music, childhood injuries, weird food preferences. At one point, they laughed at the same dark joke at the exact same time and froze. It was eerie. It was also comforting. Marcus brought up one last thing. "My mom, she had this journal. Locked drawer. I always assumed it was full of therapy stuff. Still have it?" He nodded. Next day, he handed it to her. Susan stayed up all night reading it. Louise appeared throughout, always as Elle, always with a tone of longing, of regret, of what. One entry, dated May 1983, punched her square in the soul. "He wanted me to keep her. Said we could raise her together. But I couldn't burn down my whole life. Not for love. Not again. I told him the girl would never know he existed. He cried harder than I've ever seen a man cry. I left that night and never answered his letters again." Susan's breath caught. She was the girl. She took the journal to Daniel. He read it in silence. The whole time his mouth was tight, fingers clenched on his knees. "Say something," Susan whispered. He looked up. "You're my sister." Relief poured through her like warm water. "But Mom lied to both of us." That part stayed cold. The DNA results were still days away. But what the tests would confirm would make them question everything all over again. The father she never knew had a secret of his own. You think one parent lying is bad? Susan believed her father had been the innocent one. Then she opened his safe and realized this rabbit hole had no bottom. The DNA results came in on a Tuesday. Gray skies, heavy air. The kind of day that warned you not to expect good news. Susan opened hers first. 99.8% match with Marcus Barrows. Half-sibling. Shared paternity. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. Daniel called 5 minutes later. "I'm not your brother," he said flatly. Susan closed her eyes. I know. Silence. Then Daniel, in a voice that sounded like rust. I wish I didn't. She expected grief. Or anger. What she didn't expect was guilt. She had taken something from Daniel, or at least shattered the illusion of what he thought he had. Dad knew, he said finally. He must have. Mom kept this journal, these letters, that damn motel receipt. She didn't bury it deep. She kept it like a memory box. Susan hesitated. What if he did know? Daniel scoffed. And just raised you like nothing happened? Susan looked away. People do strange things for love. Or denial. 2 nights later, Susan returned to the house. The locks hadn't been changed yet. She walked straight to the master bedroom closet. She remembered the floorboard. Her dad used to keep cash there for emergencies, a habit from his military days. But as she lifted the board, she saw something else. A small metal safe. Combination lock. She knew it. 1969, the year they married. Clicked open. Inside, a stack of letters. Not from Caleb. Not to her mother. To her. Dear Susan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry you're finding out like this. I wasn't your biological father, but you were my daughter every damn day you were mine. Her knees gave out. I knew. I always knew. Your mother told me when you were 3. She begged me to let it go. Said it would ruin everything. She was right. It would have. But I loved you more than I loved my own pride. Tears came hot and fast. I watched you grow, fall, fail, rise. I saw your first steps, heard your first swear word, drove you to that awful prom. You were mine in every way that counted. But I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I was weak. I just didn't want to lose what I had. No signature. Just Dad. She stayed in that closet for hours. Somewhere between betrayal and grace, she felt something crack. And not in a bad way. This man had lied. But this man had chosen her. And now that truth lived in her chest like a second heartbeat. Susan shared the letter with Daniel. He read it twice, expression unreadable. I still don't get to be your brother, he said finally. Susan took his hand. But you were. You always will be. She thought that was the end of it. The letters. The DNA. The journal. The safe. But grief has layers. And the past has claws. Because when Marcus called again, his voice was shaking. There's something you need to see, he said. I got access to my dad's safe deposit box. Susan's stomach dropped. What's in it? A pause. A photo. Of you. Maybe 6 years old. And a note taped to the back. She whispered. What does it say? Marcus inhaled sharply. She doesn't know. But I do. One day she will. And I hope she'll forgive me. What Susan learns next will force her to confront a truth even deeper than blood. And this time someone else has been lying too. Truth isn't always freedom. Everyone wants the truth until they get it. Susan thought she'd uncovered all the lies. But the last confession came from the one person she never expected. The photo was unmistakable. Susan, age 6, standing in her mother's garden. Tangled hair, pink overalls, arms clutching a plastic watering can. She remembered that summer. The wasp sting, the orange popsicles, the way her mother called her sweet pea, and hummed Patsy Cline at dusk. But the man who kept this photo wasn't her father. And yet he kept it for decades. Marcus sat across from her at the kitchen table, the photo and note between them. I don't understand, he said softly. Why would our dad keep this if he never contacted you? Susan didn't answer immediately. Instead, she ran a finger over the edge of the photo. I think he was waiting, she finally said. For something. Or someone. 3 weeks later, Marcus's mother agreed to meet her. They sat in the garden behind a pale blue house in Fremont, where birds chirped like nothing had ever gone wrong. Marcus stood off to the side, arms crossed, protective. His mother, Gloria, was composed but pale, like a storm cloud that hadn't yet decided whether to break. "I knew about you," Gloria said without preamble. "I knew there might be another child." Susan blinked. "I found a letter he wrote but never sent. It said Louise had cut off contact, that he thought the child was a girl, but she'd never know about him." "You didn't tell him to find me?" Susan asked. Gloria's eyes flicked toward Marcus. "I told him to respect her choice. And I told him I wouldn't compete with the ghost." Susan inhaled sharply. "I wasn't a ghost." "No. But you were a scar. And I had to choose whether to pick at it. It was cruel. It was honest. It was human." That night, Susan stood alone in her old family backyard. The lilacs were blooming. Her mother's favorite. She sat on the cracked bench beneath the tree where her father used to hang wind chimes. The wind picked up. The chimes were gone. But she still heard them. In her head. In her memory. She closed her eyes and let the silence stretch. By the end of the summer, the house was sold. Daniel moved to Chicago with his new job. They stayed in touch, awkwardly at first, then better. Siblings, not by blood but by habit. That counted too. Frank and Susan separated quietly. No yelling. Just a slow fade of warmth. He took the recliner. She kept the coffee maker. Marcus became a fixture. Not a brother, not exactly. But a constant. A mirror. A reminder that families don't just break. They bend, reshape, evolve. And sometimes they forgive. Susan never framed the photo, but she kept it in her drawer under the batteries, just in case she ever forgot where she came from. Before closing the final box, Susan found one last letter. It was unsigned, undated, and typewritten. "The truth doesn't set you free. It gives you something new to carry." She folded it and slipped it in her coat pocket, then closed the door behind her.